So today's a much better day than yesterday. I'm going to work on getting the rest of this recorded. I think I'm just going to put it all together. So this might be a little bit longer one, but this is all of the reflections from my time at the retreat. The little one is in here, so hopefully he stays content doing what he's doing, and we won't have a bunch of interruptions. But just in case, there's a heads up. So continuing to read what I wrote, just because again, I feel like there's so many pieces that if I went to every single detail, not only would I get things out of order, because when I try to remember everything that had happened, it's just like it's a lot. And so I am still reading off of what I had written. Still kind of for whatever reason struggling with reading today. So bear with me. I'll do the best that I can to get this out there. But much more positive things in this one to share. So without further ado. So I found myself in a position to attend the Crossing the Threshold healing retreat. I'd done lots of work and made incredible progress in my emotions, thoughts, and spiritual journey, but my body was still responding to stress as if none of those other factors had even improved. It was a frustrating dichotomy. I knew I was better in so many ways, but more often than not, my reactions were more frantic than anticipated. Half the time, my husband, Johnny, would ask if I was okay because my body was often responding opposite to how I was feeling in my mind. This was something I was at a loss for knowledge about how to repair. Surely there was something out there that could help with this. That's when I met Angela. We met at a craft group at a mutual friend's house. When I learned about what she did, I was immediately interested. Her specialty is TRE, which stands for tension and trauma releasing exercises. This is designed to help the body release stored stress and relay safety back to the brain. That's what I needed. I needed my brain to know that we're safe and it does not need to keep responding out of protection. So the first time I got to try TRE, it was in a group at a local shop. I had no clue what to expect, so I brought nothing with me. Turns out, because of all of my injuries and the abundance of tension stored in my body, doing these exercises on the floor without support was incredibly painful. I ended up in tears and panicked, feeling like there was no hope if I couldn't figure out how to do this. Angela instructed me to stop and moved me to a place to get my emotions regulated. She came to check on me periodically while still instructing the other students through the process. At the end of the class, she took time to talk with me about what had occurred both physically and emotionally. She was so gentle. Never once did she judge me. Never once did she tell me that any of my negative thoughts were irrational or wrong. She listened, asked questions, and carefully redirected my thoughts away from the shame I was feeling and toward my ability and possibilities. She explained that there were other modifications and ways to do TRE from a chair or even a bed and still get the same outcome. I left encouraged and so thankful for the extra time she spent with me to make sure I was okay. The next time I got to try TRE was in a one-on-one session, and I had a chair. Angela was again very gentle in how she approached me, always asking questions for clarity and to identify any better modifications throughout the session. That session was amazing. I had never known what a strong correlation there was between our emotions and our physical body. God truly has designed us in incredible ways with such foresight. I was shocked at the emotions that released during those exercises. By the end of my session, I was more relaxed than I had been in many, many years, and it felt like someone had removed a heavy backpack from my shoulders. Yes, this was exactly what I needed. So I went to the retreat. I was feeling pretty confident. I knew lots of things from an emotional perspective, and I thought I was just going to go learn about the physical. Boy, was I immediately surprised. The first activity we did was incredibly profound and brought forward so much new information about myself. We were blindfolded and asked to wait until our turn. In that waiting, I was originally pretty comfortable. I found myself listening to the background music and sort of jamming along, and then it hit me that I was going to be led outside somewhere, unable to see. I began to feel a bit of fear and anxiety, so I prayed. I asked God to remove the fear and bring me his peace. His response surprised me a little. He told me that he would not remove the fear, but that he would be beside me as I worked through it. He said I needed to feel it to know how to overcome it. So I sat with that for a while. The longer I sat, I kept hearing others in the room get escorted out, and the waiting became more and more uncomfortable. I felt like I needed to do something. God revealed that this need to do was a flight response. I'd been conditioned to believe that action was safe and rest was dangerous. So I sat with that notion for a while. Finally, someone touched my shoulder and asked if I was ready to begin my life. I emphatically said yes and allowed her to guide me out. I found that walking this way was a struggle. I have big feet, so I'm often overly cautious about where I step due to the history of injuries and falls. But I chose to trust where I was being led. I was guided outside and handed a rope. A woman said, "This is your lifeline. Follow it to the end." So I began my trek over uneven territory, around unknown obstacles, under the rope, between obstacles, all of the things. A little ways in, I was handed something cold that felt like an egg. Another woman said, "This is what is most precious to you. Carry it with you." I determined this was representative of Jesus. I kept it in my hand as I continued to follow the rope. I came to one obstacle that seemed quite complicated. It took me a little bit to get my footing, to get over it, and then I found this sense of confidence. And with the next step, was so sure my path was clear. Instead, I smashed my knee into something. That hurt, but I brushed it off, feeling with my feet for a clear path again, and kept going. I reached a point where someone began to guide me back up some stairs. The lighting changed and the temperature got cooler. I was then met with someone who hugged me and told me I'd made it. Then I was guided to someone else who hugged me and told me thank you, followed by another and another. After about 10 people thanking me, I began to cry. I'd never been good at just hearing thank you without thanking someone else in return, and it felt so different to feel appreciated. A few people added other kind little words in there. Finally, I was instructed to remove my blindfold. I was back in the room where we started, surrounded by all the other women who attended the conference. I cried more at the beauty of the journey and the kindness I'd been met with by people I had only just met. I was then traded a beautifully painted egg for the one that I had just been given along my journey. My egg has a butterfly on it that just happens to be painted with my favorite colors. I was going to have that. I'll just insert a picture here. How perfectly fitting it was. I looked down when I went to sit and I noticed that my knee was bleeding. It struck me that even when we follow where God leads, it doesn't necessarily mean we won't leave with a few battle wounds along the way, but we have to keep going to reach the beautiful blessings of the end. That first day, we also did a TRE session, a session on avoiding burnout. Too late for me, but it had great information on checking in with my body in an effort to avoid it again in the future. And we did a couple other sessions guiding how to check in with our body and release stress in different ways, including a dance party. That was fun. I ended the first day with an extra session of light therapy. I found that I was more relaxed than maybe ever, and this sense of calm lasted far longer than anything I'd ever experienced. To feel peace for a full day was so foreign. I also found that all those 50 tabs in my head had closed. My mind was quiet. I was able to think clearly on one thing at a time. All the list of things I felt compelled to keep track of was suddenly gone. Yet I didn't feel like I'd forgotten anything. All the overthinking and assessing and monitoring the surroundings, it all stopped. And yet I was more alert than before and felt completely safe. This quietness was strange, like living in someone else's head, but also such a needed break from the constant noise. I can't recall any time before that my mind was truly quiet. It has been phenomenal. The second day was a lot more emotional for me. We did TRE first, followed by more sessions teaching about additional links between the body and emotions. I was surprised at how many things linked to various health issues I've had over the years. I mean, I've read about some links, but this information was far more detailed, and it caught me off guard when I found myself emotional over it. Why is this kind of information not common knowledge? Had I known that so many symptoms were linked to emotions, maybe I'd have been able to avoid some of the severity of my burnout. I can't remember the order of what all was done that day, but at one point we did an activity where we had to write down all the hurtful things that were said to us. This felt somewhat familiar to me. In 2017, after my divorce, I had written down all the awful things my first husband had told me over the years. Then I burned them, and I used the ash in a painting where I wrote new truths about myself instead. I'll also stick a picture of that in here. But this exercise took it to a whole different level. Once we wrote down the words, we had to see them over a mirror, then proceed around our group to be told the greatness that each person could see in us. Reminder that we'd only met the day before. To hear these words from the mouths of people I just met hit me in a different way. These new people spoke so kindly, where those of the past who were supposed to have loved me had been so cruel. Now, these kind words began to feel like the truth, especially because I'd already begun to see myself in a better light. These words closely echoed things Jesus had told me in my heart healing sessions. I couldn't help but think, this must be who I truly am. So when I got back to the mirror and had to say what greatness I saw in myself, I was able to do it. And I was able to confidently tell myself, I love you. It's taken years for me to love myself, and to feel so certain after this exercise just further highlighted the growth that I've made since. At one point in the day, some more difficult emotions came to the surface, and I wasn't able to fully release them. I tried running away to cry alone, but Angela found me. I'm glad she did. There's something uniquely settling about being seen and sat with during a flood of emotion without feeling judged or like a problem needing to be solved. Angela helped me regulate so that I could finish the day, but I'd resolved to take some time later to pray and ask God about the root of those emotions. Later that night, I went outside and guided myself through the usual routine we use in prophetic heart healing. I started with prayer, which began to come out in tongues for a little bit. The Holy Spirit was heavily present. We always begin heart healing sessions with a memory of joy or appreciation in order to begin with gratitude. That memory that was brought to me was of the exercise I previously described. Jesus showed me himself whispering those words into the ears of each woman who spoke to me. Then he showed me that I saw myself in the mirror through his eyes, and that he was standing right behind me with his hands on my shoulders. I proceeded to thank him for the revelation of his involvement and the beautiful words that were spoken over me. Again, my prayer began to come out in tongues. This doesn't happen super often, but it is always indicative of the presence of the Spirit, and he was just overflowing that night. I then asked Jesus to refresh my perception of him from that memory into the present moment. There he stood right in front of me, ready to talk. He started by telling me how pleased he was with my actions and that I was on the right path. More specifically, he said my feet are firmly planted on the right path. That was encouraging to hear. I continued by asking him why I had felt fear when trying to release emotions caused by past betrayal. He explained to me that I was afraid because I was still holding the reins of control regarding how other people see me and interact with me. I was still using the sense of control as a protective mechanism, such that if I was guarded, I would not be hurt. He asked me to trust that he would cause those who interacted with me to see him within me, and that he would bring the necessary interactions to fruition, as well as guide those whom I'd be worried might turn from me for one reason or another. So I decided that he needed to take the reins. Every time I've handed something over to him, life has felt easier and the results have always been better. I trust that what he has for me is exponentially greater than anything I could do for myself. So I handed him the reins. But my hands literally felt empty, and it was quite an uncomfortable sensation. In heart healing, when we hand something to Jesus, we always ask if there's anything he would like to replace it with. In this case, Jesus handed me a rope and said, "This is your lifeline." It was the most beautiful correlation to the blindfolded journey and the transformation occurring in my life. The rope is him, his hand, the hem of his garment. As long as I'm holding tight, following him to the end, I cannot fail. He is my lifeline. On the final day of the retreat, I woke up much more encouraged and ready for more of the journey. Our morning activity challenged me, possibly even more than the blindfolded activity. We were crossing a threshold represented by two ropes tied between two trees. The ropes were roughly about 24 inches apart, so like part this way, right? And then the trees are around this way. Um, where am I? The ropes were roughly 24 inches apart, with the bottom rope close to 3 feet off the ground. We were instructed to think of the thing we were meant to accomplish that we have not yet followed through with being on the other side of the ropes, and that all the excuses and reasons why we hadn't yet accomplished it were to be left on the side where we started. In order to get across the threshold, we were required to go between the two ropes without touching the trees or the ropes with anything, including clothing or hair. We could not speak. We could use any resources on our side of the ropes to help, but those resources couldn't touch the ropes either. If anyone touched the rope, then everyone who made it across would have to start over. And finally, the entire group must make it across the threshold for any individual's advancement to count. This sounded incredibly difficult. Looking at the ropes, I felt pretty confident that I could step over them without touching and that I could help others from that side. I've got a 36-inch inseam, so it really did seem likely. However, on the first try, my second leg caught the rope. On the second try, the lanyard with my name tag touched it. So as a group, we were all thinking and motioning like we're playing charades, trying different objects we had access to and trying to lift people over and between the ropes. Very often, something touched the rope, whether by the person crossing or by those helping them. We started over frequently. The rules changed a few times as we progressed. I was determined to figure it out. I'd let too many things stand in my way of moving forward in life, and I was not going to repeat that in this symbolic exercise. I got frustrated trying to communicate with others, so I kept assessing for new ideas. At one point, we were told that after we got 4 people across, everyone would no longer have to start over if the ropes were touched. Only the person passing through would start over. We quickly figured out which 4 people to get across. From there, it was a challenge to sort out how to get others through. We all had different body types and physical abilities, so no single method seemed likely to work for everyone. Finally, we were allowed to communicate aloud with each other. This made a big difference. Much deliberation and a calming prayer later, we ended up settling on holding each person and passing them through the ropes from one side to the other. Those on the other side would hold the person's feet until they were guided past the ropes enough to stand up. Other people were watching to ensure that no part of any person touched the rope. I watched multiple people get passed between the ropes, yet when it was my turn, I found myself shaking and in tears. I was certain that I would be too heavy for these women to carry me across like that. To lean back into their arms was absolutely terrifying. I was encouraged and finally gathered my composure and laid back. Something touched the rope and I had to go back. But after doing it once, I felt more capable. Still, I needed a moment to calm down from that panic. They continued passing people through. By the time it was my time to try again, there were fewer women on my side to help carry me, and this made me doubt again. I don't remember how many times we tried and something touched the rope, causing me to go back. I even tried doing it myself again, thinking maybe that was easier. Every other option failed. I had to rely on these other women if I was going to make it across. On my final try, I was encouraged again and told that it was my mindset about my body that was being a hindrance. I had to believe it was possible. I agreed. That mindset about my body was one of the things I was meant to leave on the other side of the threshold. So I took a breath, changed my thoughts, envisioned success, and leaned back into their arms again to be passed through. Success, finally! We finished helping get everyone through and celebrated all together. It was beautiful. Later, it struck me that the night before, God had asked me to trust Him with how people would interact with me. In this exercise, I had to trust that He would give them the strength to be able to carry me through. Trust was the key to success. Later, I was told that once I changed my mindset, I was physically lighter and easier to pass across. Pretty amazing. There were so many other little things that I learned, experienced, and released all through the day. I truly felt many weights lift from me and found healing in areas I didn't realize were still unhealed. I had been encouraged time and time again. My true identity, as Jesus had shown me, had been validated across the board by everyone I met. And I saw butterflies absolutely everywhere I went. A few weeks back, I had asked God to show me a sign of a butterfly over my shoulder to indicate that I was on the right path. So to see butterflies every time I looked around me felt like a pretty positive sign. The final exercise of the day ended up being a moment of true freedom for me. We were walked through a visualization exercise that soon proved to be imagery of being inside a cocoon. We were told to envision a light inside us that grew and grew and grew. For me, this was representative of my first vision. That light that was growing in me was God's light, and I was transforming into my true self, free from the past, free from my thoughts, free from the feeling the need to control everything, free from my perceived limitations. I was becoming His creation, fully reliant upon His strength within me. Near the end of the visualization, we were given butterfly wings. My inner child was absolutely delighted. I have always loved to play dress up, and I've wanted wings for years. And here they were after an experience that felt truly transformational. I had earned my wings. I put them on and I danced in the wind, allowing them to flow behind me. I spun around like I remembered doing in elementary school. I felt sheer joy. I danced like nothing mattered. It didn't matter what I looked like or what anyone thought of me. Nothing else in the world mattered in that moment. I simply got to exist in the joy, celebrating all that God had been transforming me into. She was beautiful. I am beautiful. And that beauty has nothing to do with appearance. It is the deeper being, the soul that only God knows fully. It is the reflection of His goodness within me. It is the submission to His healing and the acceptance to become as He intended me to be. This was the physical representation of my vision, and I was brought deeper understanding of who He created me to be. The symbolic correlations through those 3 days still blows my mind. I've still got some healing to do, and there's always room for growth. But I am more clear about my purpose, my calling, and my unique giftings than I've ever been before. And that is worth everything. I am eternally grateful for this experience. God has never failed me. He has surrounded me with the most incredible women along my journey, each serving in their unique way, even those who may not be aware of His influence in their actions. I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in purposeful interactions sent to us in various moments of choice. We always have the choice. I pray we choose the harder road of healing, helping, encouraging, and persevering through every obstacle that crosses our path. Each obstacle is an opportunity to grow in some way, and growth is a pretty big part of this journey of life. So if you're struggling along your healing journey, start looking for the people around you sent to lend you a hand. As exemplified in my inability to cross the threshold between those ropes, we truly cannot do it alone. Trust is the key to success. Trust the Lord to bring what you need and who you need in every season. He never fails. It's all an endless journey of learning opportunities. Some days I excel and other days I simply survive. As long as the survival days become less frequent, then progress is being made. We'll never reach perfection, but with God's help, we can get increasingly closer over the course of our lives. And that's what's so beautiful about the journey. We're all in different places and learning different wisdom to share. God created us for community, to learn from the testimony of others. Be sure not to compare your journey with that of anyone else. God made each of us unique, and no two stories are identical. Embrace yours, ever looking forward to the beauty God is waiting to reveal somewhere down the road.